sparks flying from the sun. I hardly know you, can I confess? I feel your heart beating in my chest. You come with me.
Okay, hello everyone and welcome to day 3 of the FIS Changemaker Conference. Great to see you all here. If you can't see me right now because our chairs are already set up for the action planning, please feel free to turn them around. So before we begin our action planning, I would just like to say that it's been a pleasure so far. I'm looking forward to this last day. And before we begin the action planning, we have 2 virtual fire starters. So our first virtual fire starter is going to be from Mr. Alex Budak. So please welcome Mr. Alex Budak virtually.
Hi everyone, I'm Alex Budak. I'm a social entrepreneur. I'm a faculty member at UC Berkeley's Haas School of Business, and I'm the author of this brand new book, Becoming a Changemaker. And I'm absolutely delighted to be able to join you here today, albeit remotely, because I'm such a big believer in the work that you're all doing and in bringing changemakers together. I always say that changemaking is a team sport. And so it's really special to think about how all of us collectively can come together around our shared passion for changemaking. I thought I would briefly talk about some lessons from my own research on changemaking and some of the key insights and chapters of the book. So I guess I should begin by sharing my own definition of changemaking. Now, I think you'll see that there's not one single definition that everyone in the world agrees upon, but this is the definition that I've put together, having worked with thousands of changemakers all around the world. So I simply say that a changemaker is someone who leads positive change from wherever they are. And so you'll see in that definition that there's no mention of roles or of titles. I believe that a high school student or an entry-level product manager has just as much claim to that title as a Nobel Peace Prize winner. It's also a radically inclusive identity and one that we can layer on top of our existing identities. So you could become a changemaker lawyer, a changemaker doctor, a changemaker scientist, or a changemaker parent, a changemaker friend. There's all kinds of ways we can think about changemaking playing a role, not just in our work, but also in our lives. Now, I think overall changemaking is a field that's not that well studied. So I set out to do the first ever longitudinal study, looking at whether and how changemakers can develop over time. It's called the Changemaker Index. And by the way, if you want to take this index for yourself, it's a chance for you to understand what your greatest strength as a changemaker is. So if you want to take it for yourself and get a little bit of insight into what your changemaker strength is, you can go to changemakerbook.com/index and take the survey for yourself. That's changemakerbook.com/index. But one of the things that's been a joy for me is that I now have some of this data to look at and to see that, well, first of all, conclusively, yes, people can develop as changemakers. It's not something that you're just born with. It's something we can develop. But I've also been able to isolate the key things that the most effective changemakers do, irrespective of roles or sectors. We start to have some data around what makes someone an effective changemaker. And so I break this down, and this is the process I follow in my book as well, into 3 parts: changemaker mindset, changemaker leadership, and changemaker action. And so I thought I would briefly talk about each of these 3 parts, just to give you a little bit of a sense of sort of what we mean by each of these 3 terms, and also so you can start practicing these own ideas in your own work and life. So first is a changemaker mindset. And here I'm really inspired by the words of poet Amanda Gorman. She's the one that delivered the poem, The Hill We Climb, at the inauguration of Biden and Harris in the US. And in delivering this poem, I think the final 3 lines are a beautiful embodiment of what it means to have a changemaker mindset. So those 3 lines are, for there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, and if only we're brave enough to be it. What a perfect way of thinking about developing a changemaker mindset. For there is always light. It's recognizing that things are demonstrably really hard right now. And there's a number of really hard challenges that we're facing as individuals and as communities. But there's this belief that there's always light, that tomorrow can be better than today. We can play a role in making sure that it is, and that we may not know exactly what's ahead. It may seem dark, but that there is that light. And perhaps we ourselves can be that light to illuminate that path forward for others to join us. For there's always light. If only we're brave enough to see it. I think that vision is something that we often think is just for CEOs and executive directors. But I think that could be further from the truth. I think that each of us as changemakers can have a vision. And so sometimes it's about being able to see things that others may not see quite yet. Maybe it's a status quo that needs to be challenged, or a system that's unjust and needs to be disrupted. There's all kinds of things that we may see as change makers. We can develop that as a strength to see things that may not exist quite yet. And then that's a start for us to begin thinking about the world that we want to create. So for there's always light, if only we're brave enough to see it. And then that third line, if only we're brave enough to be it. Being a change maker takes courage. It's one of the values that I most deeply respect about change makers, because I don't think there's any way you can lead change without having some courage. And I think vulnerability, as Brene Brown teaches us, goes hand in hand with courage. But you need to have that courage to stand up and say, look, I don't know exactly the right answer, but I think this is a change worth pursuing, and I'm going to step up. And will you come along with me? It takes courage. And so the change maker mindset has this idea of believing tomorrow can be better than today, seeing things others may not see quite yet, and then having the courage to step up and do something about them. So that's change maker mindset. Let's move now into the second part, which is change maker leadership. Now, I think the way we often think about and talk about leadership is actually broken. And we often tell stories of leadership through these grandiose, heroic acts. So we might think about Steve Jobs pulling the iPhone out of his pocket for the first time. Or we might think about Nelson Mandela ending apartheid and uniting a nation. Or we might think about Eleanor Roosevelt leading the Declaration of Human Rights. These are all heroic and important leadership acts, to be sure. But I think when we put these leaders up on a pedestal, it's really easy for us to look at that and say, well, I'm not naturally as charismatic as them. I'm not an extrovert. I'm not outgoing. I'm not that brave. Does that mean I can't be a leader? I think no, absolutely not. Here's what I believe, that leaders might be scarce, but leadership is abundant. There may be only one CEO, only 5 vice presidents, only one assistant regional manager, or one assistant to the regional manager. But each of us can practice acts of leadership every single day. And so with this lens in mind, I created something called micro leadership. And micro leadership simply breaks leadership down into its smallest, most meaningful unit, which is a leadership moment. If you pay attention, you'll see that these leadership moments appear before you dozens of times per day. Tiny little chances for you to step up, go beyond yourself, and serve others. Let's take a look at what micro leadership is. There's 3 keys to being a micro leader. The first is to give yourself permission. If you keep waiting for someone else to give you permission, you might be waiting a really long time, maybe even forever. And so one of the things that change makers do is we give ourselves permission to lead. We say, look, I don't know exactly what the right answer is, but I'm gonna have some agency here. I'm gonna step up and do something about it. Give myself permission instead of waiting for someone else to give me that permission, which may not exist. The first is give yourself permission. The second is to go beyond yourself. I believe deeply that leadership at its core is about serving and helping others. And so micro leadership, you'll see, is deeply rooted in supporting and helping others as well. It could be big acts, but it could also be small acts. But fundamentally, it's about helping those around us. Here, I think of one of my favorite change makers, Sam McCracken. He's a member of the Sioux Indigenous tribe in Montana in the United States, and he's also a general manager at Nike. And so growing up, he recognized that he and his friends lacked some of the same access to sports facilities that other children did. And so when he got to Nike, he decided to step up and to serve others. He pitched an idea for something called the N7, the Native 7 shoe line. It was indigenous inspired designs on shoes and then later apparel, and the proceeds of which would go to the N7 Fund, which would support sports and recreational facilities for indigenous youth in the United States and in Canada. And as he set out about this, someone asked him, how did you know that this was a change that's worth pursuing? And he simply said, I listened to my community. I found that there was a need and I took action. And sometimes that's what the second act of changemaker leadership and micro leadership is about. It's about going beyond yourself and serving others. And then the third part is taking action again and again and again. Micro leadership, every single act may be small, right? So think about maybe it's during a meeting, you notice that one of your colleagues has been quiet the whole time and you say, hey, no pressure, but would love to hear from you if you don't mind sharing your perspective. Or maybe it's being willing to say no when everyone else says yes. Or maybe it's being the one person that stays late to help your new colleague clean up after their first event. These are all tiny little moments. And each one in and of itself isn't that big of a deal. But when you take 1, 3, 5 acts of micro leadership every single day, you do it consistently for a week and then a month, you look back and you go, wow, I've just become a leader. You give yourself permission, you go beyond yourself and you take action. And before you know it, you've had really big impact. So that's changemaker leadership. Now, the third and final part of being a changemaker is changemaker action. I teach at UC Berkeley, which has lots of really great scholars, brilliant mathematicians, and I'm the last person that should be teaching math. And so I only teach one single equation in my class at Berkeley. And it's what I call the changemaker impact equation. And simply put, your impact as a changemaker is equal to the sum of your mindset and your leadership, so that's in parentheses, multiplied by your action. What does that tell us? It doesn't take a brilliant mathematician to know that any number multiplied by 0 is 0. So even if you've got amazing changemaker mindsets and amazing changemaker leadership, if you never do anything with it, you'll never have that action and never have that impact that you want to have. So action is the multiplier force that allows us to have impact as a changemaker. But it can feel really scary to lead change. I know a number of my students at Berkeley often feel like they really want to catalyze change, but they're not sure how to get started. And they look at the scale of problems and challenges today and say, well, could I even be a change maker? Is it even worth my time? And to me, the answer unequivocally is yes. Here I think about wise words of a good friend of mine who came in as a guest speaker to my class. His name is Sid Espinoza. He's the first ever Latino mayor of Palo Alto, California. And at the time, he was the VP of philanthropy at Microsoft. And so a student of mine asked him this question, which was, and she's really passionate about climate change, climate justice, but she said, it feels really overwhelming. It feels like, maybe I could never actually create change in my lifetime. Is it worth it? And Sid said something which has really stuck with me, and I know with my students. He said, we've got to stop thinking about change as an individual sprint. Instead, we've got to start thinking about change as a relay race. That many of the problems we're trying to address as change makers, they may not be solved in our lifetime. But rather than beat ourselves up about it, to take that as perspective, to lean into others, to do work through and with other change makers. So he says, your job is to think of change as a relay race. You're going to pick up the baton from those who have come before you. And then in the 1, 5, 10, 15, 30, 40, 50, 60 years that you're working on this, your job is to advance that baton as much as you can. And then when the time comes for you to pass on the baton to the next generation, to make sure you're a good steward, that you hand it off to them, you mentor them, and you set them up for success. So those are the 3 parts of what it takes to become a change maker. You've got change maker mindset, change maker leadership, and change maker action. I'll just close by saying that I firmly believe there's never been a better or a more important time to lead positive change than right now. In my book, I start with this. The world has never been more ready for you. And that's my fundamental belief. There's never been a better time than right now. The world has never needed a change maker like you more than it needs you right now. And so I hope that you will step up and be the change that our companies, communities, and indeed our world need. Thank you for being a change maker, and go make change.
A big round of applause for Mr. Budak. So now, before we begin our action planning session, we are proud to announce our collaboration with SEMA Studios on the SDG Challenge. So what exactly is the SDG Challenge, Dr. Johnston?
Thank you. So the SDG Challenge, you're going to learn right from the amazing person who started SEMA Studios in a moment. But first, what we want you to notice about this room, I want you to look around. Look at the people around you. And the first thing I want to ask is, what does it take to be a change maker? A team, right? Do you have the team here? So I'm going to ask you this question. We have mentors in the room who today are going to help you think and ideate and create. If you're a mentor in the room, raise your hand for me. Raise your hand if you're a mentor. I find that fascinating. False. Not true. How old is a mentor? What age do you start being a mentor? 30? When you decide to be a change maker, I'm going to ask that question one more time. Raise your hand if you are a mentor, please. We're getting there. We're getting there. It doesn't matter your age. It doesn't matter your experience. You have things to share. You have things to help others achieve what they want. As Alex said, the micro leadership. I want you to think about your micro leadership today. What micro leadership act are you going to do from between now and when you get home? Micro leadership. There was micro leadership this morning. I want to thank, where's ISL London? Where's the London team? You spread out in different places. Some arrived from the ISL team and some arrived from other schools. And what did they do as soon as they got here? Hey, how can I help? I'm going to move some boxes. I'm going to help set up. Right? Absolute leadership. Right? Absolute leadership from people who are helping and doing those micro leadership acts. Notice on your table, hold up the large piece of paper for me. That is Alex Budak's Changemaker canvas. It's in your toolbox now. It's in your toolbox. There's a hard copy to play with. You've got a soft copy in the toolbox. Hold up the other piece of paper that's on your table. Recognize that one from yesterday's introduction? Yeah. Look around the room. It's present on the TVs as well. The compass is in your toolbox. Where are you going to find all these tools to create change? On the website. Maxie, where do we find this? All we have to do is click on Toolbox. All right, so you go to the website, click on Toolbox. We've got the Changemaker profile, and then you slide down a little bit. You've got every tool that's been introduced here with PDFs, sources, videos, ways to learn about it. So let us ask you this. Do you have the tools in the toolbox? Do you have the mentors in the room? Do you have your team? You ready to start thinking? We got one more input from an amazing woman who has absolutely changed the world. She's the epitome of a change maker, and their organization has created something very special just for you.
And on that note, please welcome our second virtual guest speaker, the director of the Changemaker Netflix SEMA Studios, Miss Daniela Kohn-Lieberberg.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you today, albeit virtual. I'm Daniela Kohn-Lieberberg. I'm the founder and executive director of SEMA Studios, a global impact media agency. We run the annual Social Impact Media Awards, a global documentary film competition, and a traveling series where we take our finalists and winners on a screening program around the world, as well as the education platform SEMA Academy that many of you have hopefully been able to explore. I wanted to tell you a little bit about how I got to do what I do today. I used to be a documentary filmmaker working in the humanitarian and human rights space, and I was for about 10 years between Southeast Asia and West Africa, working for a variety of non-profit organizations, NGOs to UN agencies. And during that time, I felt that the storytelling we were commissioned to create was essentially creating more harm than good. The narrative structures were very much about givers and receivers and heroes and victims. And here were the most resilient people I've ever met. And my job was to create a story that made them into subjects of poverty, that walked around with their hands out, that could play on the heartstrings of international donor communities to essentially throw money at a problem that they didn't really understand. And not only did I think this was concerning for the representation of local communities, but also it was perpetuating a aid system that was creating dependencies, that was relying on gifts being given continuously to local communities instead of empowering them to create the changes they were certainly capable and wanted to make. The storytelling aspect was problematic on the one hand. The other issue was that the distribution avenues for the type of storytelling that actually celebrated the resilience of local communities, their ingenuity and their capacity to inspire and run with local community projects. Those films didn't really have the distribution outlets at the time. We're talking 2004, 2005, 2007 is when Facebook and social media really took hold. The avenues for this type of storytelling was really only the International Film Festival circuit. And, I always give this one example of, a film about domestic abuse of women in northern India that was screening at a film festival in Canada. How did that help the women in northern India? So with that question in mind, I started making films with local community organizers in Liberia and in Senegal, making films with local communities that can be screened in local communities, that gave an excuse for coalition building, of inviting everyone that has actually been working on an issue and has never spoken to each other to come together and often legitimize conversations about things that should and needed to be changed and addressed. These idea of local impact distribution, I was able to test and realized how successful it was in building local leadership, in building community around issues that mattered locally and finding local solutions. To make a very long story short, I had a horse riding accident in Jamaica in 2012. The horse's name was One Love, fractured my knee. I couldn't be in the field making films anymore, so I decided if I can't go and make those films, that they have to come to me and have to figure out how to distribute them in ways that they could have maximum impact. So in 2012, it really was a cool looking flyer and a Facebook page, and anyone I've ever worked with that I said, we're going to change the face of social impact storytelling, that I started SEMA, which back then was the acronym for the Social Impact Media Awards, and we had almost 500 submissions in the first year. Now, 10 years in, we have a network of 3,000 content creators in 140 countries that submit their work to us. And we select about 30 finalists every year that we enter into our distribution programs. And as I mentioned before, those are our traveling series where we do in-person screenings with community organizations, with community leaders and ambassadors. Think of a TEDx for a documentary film. It's an opportunity to screen the films about the social issues you care about in your own local community. And our education program, which in all honesty came about by accident. And in 2016, I invited a group of high school students here in Los Angeles to participate in the pre-selection of the awards, and getting to meet the students afterwards really changed the trajectory of this organization. They told me they would never see a film or watch the news in the same way again. It was the sheer authenticity of the stories that they were exposed to that were such revelatory and such educational experiences for them to learn about the world and to learn about different cultures. And I remember walking back into the office and saying, we need an education program. We are doing a disservice to humanity if we don't make this gold mine of content available to educators and students who are able to utilize them. The platform is now SEMA Academy and brings together close to 100,000 students that have access to the content at this point, as well as global educational organizations. And the idea of investing in people and in their ability to do what they already do, more dynamic, more powerful, amplified, has really come to fruition in the way that we've been able to distribute this content. Let me show you a little trailer so you can see for yourself what I mean with authentic storytelling. don't change the world. People do. And we always ask ourselves, what happens after the credits roll? And to offer a toolkit and a framework for what can happen after the credits roll, we've created the CIMA SDG Challenge, which is a global challenge where young leaders and students participate in creating community projects and advocacy campaigns that have been inspired by a CIMA Academy film. We're proud to partner with the Changemaker Conference in the CIMA SDG Challenge this year and offer the winning students, class or group wonderful prizes, which include mentorship opportunities of speakers from the 2023 Changemaker Conference, as well as a fire starter session for the 2024 Changemaker Conference in Munich. If I can share with you one thing that I've learned in the almost 2 decades working in the social impact space, is that local leadership driving the direction of local development and progress is what is working in making this world a more just, more equitable place. All of you are those local leaders, and I could not be more hopeful for the future, seeing and learning about all of the incredible work you do. Thank you from all of us at CIMA. We're excited to see your projects and campaigns for the SDG Challenge.
A big round of applause for CIMA Studios. So, we are proud to be launching the SDG Challenge in collaboration with CIMA Studios, who have generously provided all of you with access to their full film library until June. Now, Dr. Johnston, what is the SDG Challenge?
So the SDG Challenge, we hope we get dozens of submissions from this group. If you're an individual working on something already, or you're just about to start something, submit it. If you're a group working on something already, submit it. If you're just about to start something, submit it. Our hope is that by the end of May, we're going to see all the impact that this group has in what you're working on. And you heard the prizes, yeah? So mentorship, for example, Dr. Douglas Walker volunteers his time to Zoom with him across the world in his expertise in mental health with your group. Other guest speakers have volunteered their time to mentor you. A fire starter in Munich, or maybe also Doha, who's also here. Maybe we can incorporate some of that. There's lots of opportunity. You've got each other. The TVs are for your use to unplug if you need to talk and see as a group. There's chart paper, there's easels, there's markers, there's post-it notes, there's a printer as needed, there's a team ready to help you up there, there's people in the room to get you what you need. What else do you need from us? Well, good. Maxie, should we set him to it? It's in the toolbox.
Let the action planning begin.
Go for it.